I think might be the most mental fucking semi-final outcome I've ever seen in the history of League of Legends, bro. Like, listen, there've been upsets before. There've been times when underdog won. But you know what? I said it earlier, I'm going to run it back. Even as someone who saw that upper bracket in LCK Summer where KT won, I just want to remind all the people, like, yeah, but they did win that one technically, right? That series was still 3-2, by the way. It was incredibly close. That one was way closer for Gen.G winning the series. And then also, if you ever watch that one series, Docdam was like fucking ascended, bro. Like, he traded all of his fucking life points for that one series in a way I've never seen from someone who, remember, only a year or two ago was considered a bum who was holding Milky Way back on fucking FPX. Like, please remember that that was real. That happened. Like, I didn't make that up. That was what was going on. And now this motherfucker's in a world's final over Ruler. Like, what? So anyway, this one was even worse though, Yamata, because this one, for real, bro, yes, certainly Gen.G had some moments, but KT could have 3-0 this even. Like, this was actually like what seemed like the most impossible result. And I can tell you, don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. You might remember what I said about betting markets. I checked before this semi-final. And before this semi-final, Gen.G was a massive favorite to win Worlds. It was something like, I think, like 2.5 to 1 at that point in time. KT was the fourth most likely. Before this semi, if you'd made a bet KT wins Worlds, they would give you 17 to 1. Now, if you want to know, even DRX was lower than that. DRX before semis of that Worlds in 2022 was 12 to 1. Because I remember, because I actually put a cheeky little bet on him, thinking, fucking hell, 12. I have to be right 1 out of 11 times. What? Like, so I even did that one famously for DRX. Like, I think it is, now everyone's rewriting history of like, oh, well, of course Chovy was going to choke. And of course, KT's really, bro, I don't think anyone could ever have predicted KT in the final. I think that is the most crazy, like, even if Handwell Life would won, surely Handwell Life would beat them. You know what I mean? What do you think of, let's just start with the big picture. How the fuck is KT beating Gen.G in the final, Yamato? Give me some thoughts.
I was like, I just, it's, you know, it's strange because I think the whole narrative around Gen.G is like people want to frame this as this was like business as usual, but this was this was like the most extreme. I don't think choking is black and white, but this was all black. Like, this was as pure of a choking job as it can get. Yeah. I think that the most signifying moments was, of course, the Oriana game for Chovy, where he died to the gank and then just like walked into BDD as he just stabbed him to death on Azir. Yep. And then I think also the game 4 where Gen.G slammed Yorick and grouped on a Drake 2 with a Yorick that has a Phage and a Heartbound Axe against an Ornn that is allowed to push a wave and has TP to join the Drake fight. That's how hard Gen.G leaned into the KT playstyle and removed themselves from their own. Because famously, it's like the whole year, Gen.G did this thing where they set up the map in a way where Drake 2 was the one where they generated gold. They made sure that they like soft contested to keep you guessing, and they contested in a way that was so beautiful, and at the same time just funneled gold into, of course, Keen's pockets, using Fog of War in a very, very nice way, sometimes into Chovy's pockets. But then when I see that Yorick just like bringing his wife to a party, you know, with a like one of those like glowing motes and a Phage on Yorick, it's like the antithesis of this champion, and also it's so antithetical to how Gen.G also play, and that just showcased to me that Gen.G was just like completely out of it. That game 1, I don't know how heavy that was, because that game 1 looked like a classic Gen.G game in terms of how controlled it was, in terms of how they like did the setup on objectives. They were in control of that game for the majority. But there were some moments that looked like back and forth, but they looked like they were going to win that game the entire time. And then we had that miracle like Sion Q chop onto, of course, Cuz in the mid wave, where I thought the game was just over. And then we had this moment where Canyon just goes 3 screens away, Wilds, Docdam under the turret, and I'm like, what on earth is happening? That is, and then he just dies, and then Gen.G gets aced, and then suddenly, you know, BDD finds these miraculous angles on the Yone, which is something we've seen him do in the past, but like for them to lose that game state is something that I had never seen Gen.G do before. When Gen.G had won games, they had won games. When they would lose, it would probably be because their prep was bad and the enemy team got a good team fight on the first Drake, and Gen.G was just playing too greedy. But the way Gen.G lost that game one was very, very strange. Kind of reminded me of that game one they lost against HLE last year in the summer finals, where you had that big comeback play with Viper finding an angle to come back into the game, where Gen.G was super, super far ahead, and it just kind of changed the tide of course, the series. But that following the Orianna disaster, I just thought that Gen.G was just not in the right headspace. And KT, of course, I think that they have found a very strong and concrete identity. And I think that Peter and Kaz are playing together better than they ever had, honestly. And it's just working so well against a team that is so used to playing a very individualistic style of League of Legends that relies on very, very sharp individual performances. But when you no longer believe in your individual performances and you're trying to play a way that everybody else played for the entire year, you are obviously not in the right state of mind. And I think I'm very careful with using the choking like moniker, but I think this was as blatant as it gets.
No, I'll start with the bigger overview. I agree with what you're getting at, by the way. One of the weirdest things about this tournament, the best contrast is the MSI that Gen.G won. If anyone goes and watches that final, the grand final against T1, I thought Dom nailed it. By the way, shout out to Dom's editor, because I always thought the guy who would be the best in the short form content was actually LS. I always thought his sound bites will carry the best. But actually, if anything, that doesn't seem to work, because the problem with LS is his sound bite's always super spicy, but then you need the 20-minute breakdown to know what he was actually saying, don't you? I actually think Dom's short form content is fucking unbelievable, mate, because when he just makes like a 2-sentence point, it's usually actually really concise. And the point he made about the MSI final, I thought he nailed, which was up until that point in that series against T1, they were just playing T1 style. They were having like team fights around all the objectives, etc. And then it's like eventually Gen.G remembered, wait a minute, we're Gen.G. Why are we doing that? Like, why don't we just pick where the fights take place? And the second they did that, bro, in the game 5, they just won the game. Like T1 over and over again had to take these bad fights. This series, Gen.G never had that realization, mate. I agree with you. They just play. It's not only that they just like played a bunch of bad, they opted into bad fights. This was crazy. Like, I've seen this team all year do the best, like, right, pull back. This isn't our fight now. We can give that dragon up, or we can reposition here, or if we fight in this part of the map. They were like opting into just bad fights, so, like almost like they were panicking and just pulling the trigger. I thought that was whack, bro. Like, that was really, because that's where fans don't realize we're not making it up. The rest of the year, Gen.G was a different team, boys. That's why we kept saying they surely will win worlds, because you watch them in any of the series, they couldn't lose, mate. And if you want to start talking about some of the players, I'll tell you the obvious player that did play like completely like shit compared to those. It is Chovy. Here's the thing. I don't think that he like hard choked all the games, but the difference is, man alive, this year was the best year ever for Clutch Chovy, bro. The amount of times, even in the regular season games they'd have against T1, that he'd pull off some crazy ult, or like go into the center of a fight and kill 3 people like fucking Neo from the Major. He did it so many times this year. But in this game here, mate, BDD was just better than him. He just was. Flower better player. And shout out to BDD, just sent it, mate. This guy was good. I don't know if he even really believed himself he was going to win the series, but I tell you what, he pressed the fucking buttons, bro. He went in. So what do you think on the Chovy angle? Obviously, people want to know what we think about Chovy not winning worlds again. Because, you know, you probably saw it on Twitter. Bro, the way they phrase it, I listen to fans. I don't agree with them, but I listen to them. They think, this is why they hate Chovy. They claim they don't hate the player. What they hate is that he's forced down our throats as the best player. The irony of people saying that who are Faker fans, by the way, is crazy. But let's put that on the shelf for a second. They hate the idea that if they don't watch super closely, all the other they think that essentially if he's the best player in the world, like everyone said for the last 3 years, he should do it at Worlds. He should just show us in these matches. This is a game against him. Did Chovy choke?
In this KT series, I would say 100% yes. I would say so. I think just the lack of poise in terms of how he side laned, and that Orianna game is just burnt into my memory. And I think for me, what's I guess natural but also sad is that like any league fan, where they start, if they're going to watch it as an entertainment vehicle, right, is going to be at the World Championship, and then it's going to expand it to everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's kind of like saying that Gen.G chokes at the World Championship, and I think it kind of, or Chovy like drops the ball at the World Championship. I think it's very reductive. It's like the equivalent of like, oh, watch this new movie And then it's like, yeah, but I know the bad guy is going to lose in the end. So what's the point of watching it? It's like, no, it's like this year was different in the sense that we saw Gen.G win a reverse sweep. We saw them win at international tournaments down 1-2 against a Chinese team, against a Korean team in T1. They were insanely dominant, 29-1. We come into the World Championship, of course, and the meta barely changes at all. This was just like additional layers to the meta that people added. And there was no world where, Gen.G came in at the same time as the team that is the least flawed in a world where every other team is insanely flawed. LPL was in shambles. We saw them beat How Alive over and over again. We talked about their problems. And T1, was the main competitor of anything. Everyone looked at this World Championship as Gen.G could potentially lose against T1 because T1 had times during the year where they were very, very impressive. I think for the longest duration, it was basically like a competition who was the second best between T1 and HLE. There were periods where T1 was better, periods where HLE was obviously better, like late summer or in winter. But with that all context in mind, it's like this is not the same as the previous years. Like 2023, when they lost to Bilibili, that wasn't like some crazy super team. This wasn't stacked with Ruler and Canyon players that have done it and have gone all the way and have made a kind of a reputation for themselves of being like insanely clutch. Last year, obviously, they had Pays and Lehens, and I don't think that you can pinpoint that specifically to Chovy as being a choker. That's why I think like the narrative around it's like, oh, is Gen.G just the same story as usual? No. This is far more extreme than I've ever seen anything really. I think as being such a big favorite, and it's funny always like, oh, KT beat them once. It's like, yeah, but under the pressure, which is such an important aspect, under pressure, Gen.G 3-0'd them with ease, right? But coming into this series now, it's like how heavily they dropped the ball. Like I still think this is like one of the biggest upsets ever, regardless of KT beating them in a best of 5 in a double elimination format. Like I don't think that adds to the conversation at all. This Gen.G roster still like leading up to that point, I think they were easily in the conversation of being like one of the best rosters of all time, if not the best roster of all time, considering how many styles they mastered at the same time and the range of play that they had. I think that what you can talk about Gen.G concretely, if anything, is like Canyon's performance was something that was lackluster for such a long time. And in this series as well, you hate to think about it, but still, if it wasn't for that throw in game 1, maybe the tide of everything shifts because I do think in the conversation of pressure, being like losing a one game can really impact you and the rhythm that you have in the series, because that's something that Gen.G almost never did. Like losing a one game, they've lost games. And they did it with like, oh, this was our fault, but let's move on. This was like, oof, this was a new layer that they needed to face. And it comes back to the first topic that I mentioned. It's like in terms of the coaches, we give praise to the other guys. It also makes me think, it's like Gen.G, you've managed to piece it together and be like insanely good throughout the entire year. And you've made it work with such big players. But you always have to think about the lack of prep that Gen.G had in terms of the drafting and how loose it was. When it comes back to bite you, that's when you begin to, like, the wheels begin to turn, you begin to question things. A simpler approach sometimes gets you further, because that's been the case now for KT.
When people get mad, Yamato, because they've done it every year, when we say things like, wow, this Gen.G team could win the Golden Road, wow, they might be the best team ever, people get really mad, but it's actually very stupid that they get mad, and here's why. Because what they always say is, they wait until Worlds happens. Then once Worlds happens and they know Gen.G didn't win, they go, ha, you said they were going to be one of the best. Yeah, all we can do is predict what's going to happen. Like, we, as analysts, we literally do this show every week. We have to do a week to week. You have to understand that's almost like a power ranking. Power ranking doesn't actually mean that team is better than the other teams in the ranking. It means that currently they're in hotter form. What we're doing on this show is analyzing the current state of that team. And I'm sorry, it would be bad analysis to take a team team that loses like, one series every fucking split and be like, yeah, it's just an all right team, but we'll see how Worlds goes. That would be a really shit show, and that wouldn't be analysis. I'll give you the obvious analogy that if you're smart, you'll get, and if you're really stupid, you won't get it at all. So who gives a fuck, T1 fans, right? Do you know how the weather works? The weather is based on things like there's a bunch of markers within the environment that you can check that suggest a certain type of weather will come that day. But who among us, I would ask the question, hasn't looked at one of those apps that says it'll stop raining for 10 minutes in 20 minutes from now and gone, oh, perfect. And we treat it like it was a train timetable. We go, right, what I'll do is I'll wait in a little bit and then I'll get my coat on and I'll go out quickly in 15 minutes so I won't get rained on, and I'll go to the post box and I'll get the post, I'll come back and I'll be fine. And you go out and it's still raining. You go, what the fuck? I thought the app said, yeah, but it can't read the future. It can only look at the trend. And sometimes you will get a really crazy one. Sometimes, like, there's a famous example in England that people used to use to make fun of this very famous weatherman, where in the 1970s, he said something like, there won't be like a fucking, I can't remember if it was like a hurricane or something like that. Like he said something like there won't be one, and it turned out there was one. But the point is, if you looked at all the data, it actually suggested there wouldn't be one, but it was like a freak thing came out of nowhere, and it just suddenly happened. And everyone said, like, fucking idiot, he doesn't know what he's talking about. No, actually, that's how you know he does know what he's talking about, because all the other times he was right, and that's what you call the exception that proves the rule. So first of all, it's just silly. Like, I hope people realize it wouldn't work on either end if we did analysis the way they're saying. Right? Imagine the whole year, every time T1 sucks, we just go, yeah, but they'll probably get it together and win Worlds. So actually, they're still the best team. Like, that would just be dog shit for that too. So I don't think people realize, listen, totally banter people and say, lol, you were wrong. That's fine. That's just part of being a fan, by the way. That is absolutely a part of fan culture. I would never say against that. But we are actually doing our jobs when we say Gen.G is the best team. And also, by the way, I'll just point this out, just so I like accuracy. Miss me telling me that we said 2023 Gen.G was the best team in the world of all time. That was JDG's year, you cocksuckers. I was there. We glazed JDG the whole year. In fact, what really tilts you guys is after they lost that Worlds, we did that episode where all of us agreed, even though that team didn't win Worlds, it is the best team ever to play League of Legends. I know that one tilts you even more, T1 fans, because they didn't even win Worlds and we said it. But that was also based on what I think is a good piece of logic, which is because the main strength of JDG was team fighting. Bro, I think that might be the only style that would work in every year of League of Legends ever. Like, you actually maybe could drop that team in any better. I think they'd have a chance. But yeah, I just thought I'd make that point, because let's talk some more about this series. I'll tell you what is actually a sign of how crazy overpowered this Gen.G roster is, bro. You would think if you have on paper a super team of players, and the only player who's not a super name is Duro, and by the way, he was contending for best support in the world, for real. Like, look, I probably would still have given it to Kerry 8 times, but Duro played awesome the whole year. Like, believe it or not, even when Gen.G was at their best, there is one factor I think carried through to this Worlds from the regular season, which wasn't amazing, which is, bro, I'll tell you who has let me down also, but he just got away with it because of the Chovy drama. Bro, where the fuck was Canyon this year? This year, I'm saying, man. Not this tournament, not this year. Canyon's actually had sort of a down year for me, mate. Like, he's had a whole bunch of regular seasons that were nothing. They were just like whatever. And he'd have some bunch of, and then now I think he was kind of a bit mad this world. It's like, I don't think he was terrible, but I tell you what, this is the guy that we all consider the GOAT jungler. Like, and he's playing with like prime Chovy. I'd ask that question as much as people want to put it all on Chovy. I'd ask Canyon, mate, what more do you want? You've got fucking Peak, Keen, Ruler, and Chovy. Homie, just play the game. Again, we're not saying you're playing Order. I think Order's been unbelievable this year. I think Order and Tarzan are the only two other junglers that can just say, I did nothing wrong. I just did an awesome job. Mate, this is fucking cause. The joke is he once was on T1 and considered not good enough. Like, no one gives a fuck. Like, Canyon, mate, where were you? What do you think about Canyon?
I'm with you. It's like the playoffs was scary, and I think that Canyon for the longest time, especially during his tenure here in Gen.G, he, like in terms of regular season play and until it really mattered, he kind of like just stepped up and figured it out, like in the final series, or whether it was like through his pocket picks, like a Kha'Zix pull-off against the Xin Zhao that he did against T1, or the pivot in the meta that he did at MSI when they won it the first time around, where he played all the AP junglers that nobody else could play, or these niddly 5-game picks that he slammed and, you know, did decent in. Besides that, maybe one game against Owner where he like died against his Lee, but ended up winning anyway. Like in my mind, I thought that he kind of just got away with doing that because he stepped up to the plate. And looking at his playoff run, like everyone saw that he was like underperforming, but with Gen.G in particular, it was like, it doesn't matter. It's like one GOAT is underperforming. You have like a couple of more here. Like, it's no problem. It's no problem at all. But here, I really thought that Canyon, especially when the earlier matches that he played, it did seem like he was ramping up and he was finding form and he was doing well. But in this particular series, it's like he just wasn't there at all. Like even down to his champion choices. Like slamming the Pantheon in that game 2 was also very strange. It kind of seemed like he didn't evolve as a player and didn't keep up with what the meta was and with the times. And that is kind of like scary, you know, like for me, something that I always paid attention to was like the amount of solo queue hours, solo queue numbers. That was the start, something that they just started ramping up after they lost to Katie the first time. And I wonder if there was, you know, the philosophy in terms of how hard they practice and how much effort they put in. Like Canyon was always the guy that was consistently like just rank one. And when that is like, when you're no longer that rank 1, you begin to like look at the details in terms of how it affects your gameplay. And it makes me think, is like, was the lack of emphasis and the lack of effort behind what you did as the player you're supposed to represent as Canyon, was that the downfall of Canyon in this context? Because I remember so many final series, like his final ones in D+, like outside of course the last year that looked very lackluster. It's like I remember that series against Gen.G that he almost like just won together with Showmaker against Chovy and Ruler. You know, I remember those Kane games where you did completely crazy things, and I can think of many games that you carried even more recently. But it just seems like everything is catching up to the Canyon method, because we live in a world now where there's so many damn good junglers. Like we talked about it the whole year. This whole year seemed to be the year of the junglers, and it seems you know, sometimes you have players that are really, really damn good, and they are doing and approaching things a certain way, and there's a point where you no longer get away with it. And then you have to play catch up. I think the best example that I can give is a player like Hylissang. Hylissang was one of the greatest European players of all time, but he had a very, very strange method. Like when off-season hit, he just didn't play League at all. And then he came into the office, and then you had to deal with the fact that, you know, he would be out of shape, and you needed to figure that out. And I think at some point, a player like Hilly just, you know, that method just no longer was enough, because players around it just got better and better. And I wonder if Canyon has finally reached that point where his approach to the game is just not like it doesn't pass anymore. Because if you get smoked by Cuz, you know, there's a long list of junglers that can also pull out that performance too.
Well, you know what, Yamato? If you asked me about Canyon this year, I'd say, you know what? No fucking good Worlds performance, no Worlds title, no chance in the end, even though he had no excuse. He had all the best fucking players.
More cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.